They mocked her, just a black cleaning lady in a massive financial corporation. No one believed she could make any difference, let alone overthrow the powerful CEO. But everything changed when she uncovered a shocking secret hidden right under everyone's noses. To most, she was invisible, a figure blending into the background, unnoticed and underestimated. Yet a twist of fate turned her into the central figure of a groundbreaking story. What could have possibly transformed her into the one holding the fate of the entire corporation in her hands? Think you know how this ends? Keep watching. The twists will leave you speechless. Emily Harper, a humble cleaning lady, had worked at a major corporation for 15 years. But behind the image of a woman holding a mop was extraordinary intelligence and resilience, qualities that would change everything. Emily began her day earlier than anyone else, sweeping floors, emptying trash cans, and scrubbing surfaces until they gleamed, ensuring everything was spotless before employees arrived. She was also the last to leave, tidying up long after everyone had gone home. To most of her colleagues, Emily was just the cleaning lady, a familiar yet unnoticed presence, as inconspicuous as the walls or desks in the office. Nobody knew anything about her life, dreams, or past, and they never cared to ask. Executives often strode past her in tailored suits, their phones constantly buzzing as they discussed multi-million-dollar deals. To them, she was merely part of the backdrop, doing work they wouldn't bother to touch. But Emily was far more than just a woman with a broom. Late at night, while finishing her work, Emily would overhear conversations in the boardroom. The executives, assuming she wouldn't understand or wouldn't care, talked openly about business strategies, company profits, and critical financial decisions. They discussed promotions, layoffs, and the company's future. Emily listened, each word becoming a fragment of a much larger picture. Over the years, she quietly gathered a profound understanding of how the company operated. She knew the employees, the organizational structure, and even the most sensitive issues the company faced. While others treated her as invisible, Emily observed everything with a sharp mind and an attentive eye. Even though her job wasn't in the corporate realm, Emily kept her intellect sharp. As she cleaned each corner of the office, she reflected on the executives' decisions, questioning their soundness. But no one ever asked her opinion. No one even considered the possibility that this woman might know more than they assumed. Emily wasn't bitter about her job. She took pride in doing it well, knowing it provided stability for her family. But the stark difference in how people treated her never escaped her notice. To them, the cleaning uniform symbolized limitations, a silent judgment she refuted in her heart. What they didn't know was that Emily had once led a promising career. She had been a financial analyst, adept at interpreting data and making critical decisions. But a family tragedy forced her to leave her dream job, trading it for the steady hours and reliable paycheck of cleaning work to care for her loved ones. Although her life had taken an unexpected turn, Emily never let go of her sharp analytical mind. In her free time, she read financial articles and tracked market trends. To her, knowledge was power, and even without a position of authority, she understood she still had value. She could still make a difference. Her business acumen never left her. So, when employees casually discussed sensitive company matters, Emily's ears perked up. She noticed financial reports left carelessly on desks, glanced at charts on whiteboards, and began to discern an alarming pattern. The numbers didn't add up, and her suspicions grew. Of course, Emily wasn't in a position to say anything. She was just a cleaning lady. Who would listen to her? But deep down, she knew something wasn't right about how the company was being run. As she continued her daily tasks, Emily began noticing more discrepancies. She wasn't intentionally searching for them. They were simply there, visible to anyone who cared to look. From misplaced financial documents to whispered hallway conversations, Emily absorbed everything like a sponge. She realized something was seriously wrong within the company, and it was only a matter of time before it all unraveled. The employees and executives never paid attention to Emily. To them, she was merely a woman doing a simple job. Yet, while she cleaned the office, Emily quietly unraveled the inner workings of the company. Over time, She began to realize that the corporation she had loyally served for years was facing a grave threat, and she, the unnoticed cleaning lady, was the only one who could see it. James Carter commanded respect, whether people liked him or not. He had worked tirelessly to build the company from the ground up, and in his mind, no one understood its value better than he did. His leadership style was cold and unforgiving. The company thrived under his iron fist, but at a steep cost. To James, success wasn't just about making money. It was about maintaining absolute control. He had no tolerance for mistakes. Employees feared him, and with good reason. He was known to fire people over minor errors, publicly humiliating them before casting them out. To James, every employee was either an asset or a liability. He had no patience for anyone who didn't meet his impossibly high standards. The senior executives mirrored his attitude, treating those beneath them with the same cold indifference. Emily was no exception. To James, she was just part of the scenery, a powerless figure with no influence. In truth, he hardly regarded her as a person, seeing her merely as a tool to keep his office immaculately clean. One morning, as Emily was mopping the marble floor in the lobby, James strode by. His expensive leather shoes echoed sharply against the spotless tiles. The sound of his footsteps reverberated through the quiet space. He glanced at Emily, diligently focused on her work, and allowed a faint, condescending smile to cross his face. He said nothing, but the disdain in his expression spoke volumes about the superiority he believed he possessed. This wasn't the first time. James's indifference toward those beneath him was evident in every gesture. To him, the janitorial staff, receptionists, and lower-level employees were nothing more than small cogs in the grand machine he had built. They weren't worth his attention or concern. His focus was solely on larger matters: growing the company, generating profits, and preserving his position of power. At a lavish company gala, the atmosphere was buzzing with the clink of champagne glasses and the soft hum of jazz music. A group of lower-level employees gathered, laughing and gossiping about office life. James, busy entertaining the company's top investors, happened to pass by. One of the employees chuckled and remarked, "She's been here her whole life. Probably doesn't dream of anything beyond being a cleaning lady." The group burst into laughter, finding humor in the idea that Emily could never rise beyond her station. To them, she was a permanent fixture of the office, a woman who would keep mopping floors as long as her strength allowed. James overheard the conversation and let out a derisive chuckle of his own. To him, the notion of someone like Emily climbing beyond her role was utterly laughable. She was a servant, nothing more, nothing less. As he walked away, he didn't spare her another thought. But Emily Harper, the woman they mocked and underestimated, would soon become the center of the greatest upheaval in the company's history. James Carter, the iron-fisted leader of the company, prided himself on his authoritarian style. He believed his decisions were infallible and dismissed any dissenting opinions. Senior executives, fearful of his wrath, avoided challenging him at all costs. In James's world, his word was law, and anyone who dared defy it was swiftly removed from the equation. James Carter's relentless pursuit of power earned him many enemies, but he didn't care. As long as the profits continued to climb, he believed he was untouchable. What James failed to realize, however, was that his obsession with control had blinded him to the cracks forming beneath the surface. The company he had built on a foundation of excellence was now fracturing under poor financial management, hidden by the very executives he trusted. Once a brilliant leader, James had grown complacent over the years. Detached from the day-to-day operations, he ignored the warning signs that something was amiss. And while he walked past Emily Harper, the cleaning lady whom everyone dismissed as background noise, he remained oblivious to the fact that she was piecing together the very truths he was too blind to see. Emily, during the quiet hours of her work, saw everything. The whispered conversations in the hallways, forgotten financial reports left on desks, and the nervous glances exchanged during meetings. She didn't need recognition or praise. She simply observed, silently cataloging the poor decisions and dangerous cover-ups unraveling before her eyes. One morning, as Emily bent down to scrub the marble floor, James strode past her, the sharp clack of his polished leather shoes echoing through the pristine lobby. He cast her a fleeting glance, his lips curling into a smug, dismissive smile before he turned away, utterly indifferent to her presence. To James, she was just the cleaning lady. But to Emily, every step he took was like a ticking clock, counting down to the collapse he couldn't see coming. James continued to believe that no one beneath him could pose a threat, especially not someone like Emily. He had no idea that while he fortified his image of authority, Emily was quietly assembling the pieces of his impending downfall. Emily Harper was far from the ordinary woman they assumed her to be. Before her life took a detour, she had been a skilled financial analyst at a small firm. She was fluent in the language of finance, adept at spotting hidden patterns in data, and solving complex problems with ease. But tragedy struck, forcing Emily to abandon her promising career. Family came first, and when the unexpected happened, she needed a steady job to care for her loved ones. She took the cleaning position without complaint, working hard to support her family and pay the bills. Yet her sharp, analytical mind never dulled. As she cleaned floors, Emily often pondered the financial articles she had read the night before. While emptying trash cans, she connected the dots from conversations she overheard. Emily understood the nuances of finance, grasped market trends, and had a keen awareness of what was happening within the company. While James and the executives continued to see her as a shadow, Emily quietly held the keys to the company's future. And when the truth came to light, it would change everything. Emily had never let her financial skills fade, despite life steering her down an unexpected path. At work, she couldn't ignore the details others overlooked. Financial reports, spreadsheets left abandoned on desks, or pinned to bulletin boards. Things that seemed mundane to most employees stood out as critical clues to Emily. One day, while dusting a low-level employee's desk, Emily noticed a quarterly financial report carelessly left out. Her eyes lingered on it, and almost immediately, she spotted something unusual. The revenue figures didn't align with the expense forecasts she had glimpsed elsewhere. Intrigued, she studied the document further. The discrepancies weren't minor, they were glaring. To someone without a financial background, the inconsistencies might have seemed trivial, but to Emily, they were flashing red flags. Something was seriously wrong. In the weeks that followed, Emily noticed more of the same troubling patterns. Departments had inconsistent reports, and many figures in internal documents were grossly inflated. One document in particular stood out to her, a quarterly projection left in the CFO's office. The forecast for the next quarter was overly optimistic, completely disconnected from the company's actual financial condition. Emily knew this wasn't just carelessness. This was something far worse, financial mismanagement. Her mind raced as she began piecing together the fragments of information she had gathered during her shifts. The numbers told a story no one else seemed to notice. The company was on a catastrophic trajectory, not just due to poor management but because of something far more deliberate and systemic. Funds were being allocated in bizarre ways, and expenses were climbing faster than the company could sustain. Despite the growing evidence, Emily knew she couldn't simply walk up to someone and lay out her findings. Who would believe a cleaning lady? Yet, she couldn't stand idly by as the company spiraled toward disaster, especially when she knew she might be able to stop it. Emily began documenting everything. She meticulously noted details from the reports she came across, cross-referencing them with materials from other offices. She recorded inconsistencies, inflated projections, and troubling patterns that kept appearing. Gradually, her notes painted a clearer picture of the underlying issues plaguing the company. These weren't minor errors. This was systemic mismanagement, reckless spending on unnecessary projects, and intentional efforts to obscure losses in the company's books. As the weeks passed, Emily's concern grew. The company's leadership either failed to recognize the problem or was actively covering it up to protect their own interests. She wasn't sure which was worse, but one thing was certain. Without intervention, the company would collapse. One evening, after finishing her shift, Emily sat quietly in the break room. She reflected on everything she had uncovered. The company was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, yet no one seemed to see it. She wondered how much longer it would take before the truth came out, when the numbers could no longer be manipulated and everything would fall apart. Emily knew she had the knowledge and skills to act, but she was trapped in the role of a cleaning lady, a role where no one expected her to have answers. Still, Emily wasn't the type to give up easily. Her past had taught her resilience, how to push forward even when the odds were against her. Emily realized she had a unique advantage. No one was paying attention to her. Everyone in the company underestimated her, and that gave her the opportunity to act unnoticed. She understood that the company's future, and perhaps her own, was now in her hands. The question was, what would she do with what she knew? Remain the invisible cleaning lady, or step into the light to expose the truth? Emily rose to her feet, her eyes burning with determination. Cleaning up small messes was about to end. Now, she was ready to tackle something far greater, a financial disaster waiting to erupt. Day by day, Emily Harper quietly gathered information. Every conversation, every document carelessly left on a desk became another piece of the puzzle she was assembling. The irregularities she had spotted in financial reports were no longer isolated incidents. They were signs of a deeper issue, rotting the company from within. Employees were concealing losses, manipulating figures, and engaging in risky deals no one wanted to confront. Meanwhile, the company was hurtling toward a financial abyss. Emily's silent resolve grew stronger with each passing day. She wasn't just cleaning floors anymore. She was preparing to expose the truth. Emily had started documenting everything meticulously. She noted every detail: the discrepancies in financial records, the cryptic conversations she overheard, and the shady deals hinted at during closed-door meetings. She understood that what she was uncovering was dangerous. But Emily wasn't naive enough to think she could walk into a manager's office and expose the truth without solid evidence. She knew no one in the company would take the word of a cleaning lady seriously. Worse, they might accuse her of prying or even fire her. So, Emily chose to stay silent, continuing her role as the invisible worker while quietly building a case. Every day, as she worked, Emily paid close attention to the conversations around her. Executives and senior staff spoke freely in the hallways, confident she wasn't listening or wouldn't understand. They discussed business strategies, upcoming profit reports, and the company's public image. But beneath their confident tones, Emily could detect concealed anxiety, the slight tremors in their voices that betrayed their worries. One late evening, as Emily was cleaning near the executive boardroom, she overheard two senior managers walking by, speaking in hushed tones. They were discussing the upcoming quarterly profit report, their voices tense. One of them mentioned that the numbers didn't look good and that they would need to adjust the figures to make the report more presentable. Emily froze, the mop in her hand motionless. She immediately understood what adjust meant. They were planning to falsify the numbers. As the two men walked away, oblivious to her presence, Emily's mind reeled. Her earlier suspicions were confirmed. This wasn't just incompetence, this was fraud. In the following weeks, Emily paid even closer attention to the company's inner workings. She noticed certain employees staying late, holding frequent secretive meetings, or hastily revising records. Financial reports were being altered at the last minute, and expenses were hidden under vague budget categories. She overheard discussions about off-the-books transactions and partnerships that were conspicuously absent from official records. The more Emily uncovered, the clearer the picture became. The company wasn't just struggling, it was teetering on the brink of collapse. James Carter, the company's CEO, remained blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding right under his nose. His arrogance had blinded him to the warning signs. He continued running the company as though everything was perfect. He spoke of expansion plans and future investments with unwavering confidence, oblivious to the fact that his empire was built on lies. Emily observed James from a distance every day. He strolled through the office, shook hands with investors, delivered inspiring speeches to employees, and smiled for the cameras. His detachment left Emily astounded. How could someone so intelligent and successful fail to see what was happening right in front of him? Emily felt conflicted. Part of her wanted to let it all fall apart. The arrogance, the disregard for the people who kept the company running, and the blind faith in their own infallibility. It all seemed deserving of failure. But Emily wasn't just a passive observer. She understood that if the company collapsed, the fallout wouldn't stop with its leaders. Hundreds of innocent employees would lose their jobs, and their families would suffer. The destruction would ripple far beyond the walls of the boardroom. Though no one asked her to, Emily felt a sense of responsibility. She had the knowledge and the skills to act, and ignoring that would feel like betraying herself. Emily exhaled deeply, her gaze resting on the pen and small notebook on the break room table. In the silence, she knew she already had the answer. Each passing day, Emily's anxiety grew. She knew she could expose the truth, but she also understood the risks. None of the leadership would trust, let alone listen to, a cleaning lady. One misstep could backfire disastrously, but silence was no longer an option. The company's collapse was no longer a distant possibility. It was a ticking time bomb, and someone needed to act before it was too late. Week by week, Emily continued gathering information. Her notebook gradually filled with numbers, details, and troubling patterns. What had once been random observations was now forming a case. Each note brought her closer to understanding the full scale of the financial disaster the company faced. As she connected the dots, the picture became increasingly clear. The leadership wasn't just involved in shady dealings. They were orchestrating large-scale fraud. They were hiding massive losses from investors and gambling recklessly with the company's future. Despite the growing gravity of her discoveries, Emily didn't feel afraid. Instead, she felt something stronger, a sense of purpose. She had worked here for 15 years, witnessing the company's growth from the ground up. Now, she was the only one who truly understood what was happening. Her colleagues continued to mock her, treating her like an invisible cleaning lady. They had no idea Emily held the company's future in her hands. She stood at a crossroads. One option was to let everything crumble, watching the empire collapse around them. The other was to step forward and use what she had uncovered to save the company from the disaster it had created for itself. That evening, while cleaning in the office of William Davis, the chief financial officer, Emily felt an unusual sense of unease. William always had an air of detachment and calculation, but she had never pinpointed what felt off until now. A stack of documents lay open on his desk, almost beckoning her to take a closer look. Emily glanced around the room to ensure no one was watching. People assumed her presence was routine, but this time was different. What she was about to uncover was far greater than any mess she had ever cleaned. Her eyes scanned the pages, and the weight in her chest deepened. The numbers were undeniable. Inexplicable expenses, funds funneled into suspicious accounts, and, worst of all, evidence that William was embezzling money to cover up the company's financial failures. Emily's heart raced. The company wasn't just in trouble, it was on the brink of bankruptcy. And William was doing everything he could to bury the truth. The fallout, if this information came to light, would be catastrophic. Hundreds of employees would lose their jobs, investments would evaporate, and countless lives would be devastated. Emily took a deep breath, her mind spinning. This wasn't just about the executives anymore. She thought about the receptionists, the cleaning staff, the hardworking people who showed up every day, completely unaware that their futures were hanging by a thread. She knew she had to do something. But how? How could a cleaning lady, someone invisible to the executives, bring down the CFO and expose such a massive cover-up? The next morning, Emily made a decision. She couldn't remain silent, but she had to act wisely. Confronting William directly was too dangerous. And James Carter, the CEO, was too blind to the reality unfolding around him to listen to someone like her. But Emily had something most people didn't: the ability to blend into the background. She had observed this company for years and knew how to deliver a message without drawing attention to herself. That afternoon, Emily took a bold risk. She typed up an anonymous letter, outlining everything she had uncovered about the company's financial inconsistencies. She was careful not to reveal too much, knowing that credibility depended on how the information was received. Emily didn't need to overwhelm James with every detail at once. She only needed to grab his attention, forcing him to take a closer look at what was happening right under his nose. In her letter, Emily outlined the most glaring red flags: discrepancies in financial reports, suspicious accounts managed by William Davis, and the looming threat of bankruptcy that no one seemed to notice. Her words were precise, ensuring each point was clear without revealing her identity. She knew if William or any other executive discovered who was behind the letter, her job and possibly her safety would be at risk. Emily printed the letter, carefully placed it in an envelope, and waited until the office was nearly empty. Quietly, she stepped into James Carter's office. His desk was cluttered with papers, reports stacked high, but Emily knew exactly where he always placed his important documents, right on top where he would see them first thing in the morning. Taking a deep breath, Emily placed the envelope there, ensuring it would be the first thing James noticed. As she left the office, her mind raced with questions. Would James read the letter? And if he did, would he take it seriously? Emily couldn't predict his reaction. He might dismiss it as nonsense or, worse, perceive it as an affront to his authority. Still, deep down, Emily hoped the truths she'd laid bare would be enough to reach him. She had done her part. The rest was up to James. The next morning, Emily resumed her usual routine, cleaning the offices and ensuring everything was in order. But her mind couldn't focus. Every thought circled back to James's office. Had he read the letter? Was he piecing together the clues, realizing the company was in far greater danger than he believed? Or had he pushed it aside, blinded by overconfidence in his leadership? Emily couldn't let her anxiety show. She forced herself to remain calm, blending into the background as she always did. But as the hours passed, she couldn't stop wondering if her anonymous warning had made any impact. That afternoon, while cleaning near the executive offices, Emily overheard something that made her heart race. James's assistant was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. He's furious, the assistant whispered. There's an issue with the financial reports. He's called an emergency meeting with the board. Emily paused briefly, her heart pounding in her chest. The letter had worked. James had seen the problem and was taking action. This was only the beginning, but Emily knew that once James began digging, the truth would inevitably come to light. The days of William Davis, the CFO, defrauding and concealing financial failures were numbered. Yet, Emily felt no relief. She knew that while the wheels were now in motion, the journey ahead would be long. The powerful executives wouldn't let go without a fight, and this battle had only just begun. In the following days, the atmosphere in the office grew tense. Emily continued her work as usual, quietly listening and observing. She knew she had set something unstoppable in motion, but she also understood that the real fight was still ahead. The company's survival and her own future hung by a fragile thread. James Carter sat silently in his office, his gaze fixed on the wall across from him. The crumpled letter still lay on his desk, a constant reminder. At first, he had dismissed it, assuming it was the work of a disgruntled employee or an unfounded rumor meant to cause trouble. Who would dare question his leadership? He had built this company from nothing, transforming it into a financial empire. Yet, there was something about the tone of that letter that unsettled James Carter more than he cared to admit. James wasn't the type to act on anonymous accusations. He believed in hard evidence, not rumors. However, as days passed, small but troubling details began to surface. Details that aligned perfectly with the claims in the letter. Some reports were left unsigned. Previously balanced numbers began to look suspiciously off. James tried to dismiss these anomalies as coincidences, but his instincts, honed over years of leadership, whispered that something was seriously wrong. Reluctantly, James ordered an internal investigation. He didn't disclose the reason to anyone, not even his closest advisors. If there was a problem, he wanted the truth without tipping anyone off. The initial findings shocked the senior leadership team. Cracks began to show. Financial reports revealed discrepancies stretching back years. A deeper investigation uncovered even more startling truths. Several of the company's major deals were poorly structured, exposing it to enormous financial risks. Losses were buried in obscure budget categories, while profits were inflated to mask failures. The financial reports had been manipulated to appease investors, but the most damning discovery was tied to William Davis, the chief financial officer. The investigation revealed that William had been embezzling funds for years. He had discreetly funneled company money into personal accounts, using sophisticated accounting tricks to cover his tracks. Worse yet, William had orchestrated fraudulent schemes to exaggerate the company's performance, deceiving shareholders and employees alike. The company wasn't just in trouble, it was teetering on the brink of collapse. The mountain of debt and mismanagement William had concealed was finally ready to come crashing down. James Carter was furious. He immediately summoned William, but the confrontation brought no satisfaction. William tried to justify his actions, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was undeniable. Though deeply shaken, James had no choice but to fire William on the spot. As William walked out of the building for the last time, James stood in silence, torn between anger and humiliation. How had he, someone who prided himself on control, failed to see the signs? The investigation continued, peeling back layers of deceit. James felt blindsided, his confidence in himself shattered. He had always considered himself a vigilant leader, capable of identifying problems before they spiraled out of control. But this time he had been gravely mistaken. The company, the culmination of his life's work, was now on the verge of collapse. And the most painful realization was that it had taken an anonymous letter for him to see the truth. Reviewing the final report, James grasped the full extent of the crisis. William hadn't just stolen money. His fraudulent actions had placed the entire company in jeopardy. If the truth got out, stock prices would plummet, investors would flee, and the company might face criminal charges. James couldn't stop asking himself, who had sent that letter? The investigation yielded no clues. The whistleblower had been meticulous, leaving no trace. The precise details in the letter suggested someone with an intimate knowledge of the company's financial operations, yet James couldn't identify who it was. That person hadn't just saved the company, they may have saved James's career. Yet they sought no recognition, left no name, and acted only to prevent the company's collapse. James mulled over everything that had happened, searching for a clue he might have missed. The thought of involving the police to track down the author of the letter briefly crossed his mind, but he knew the sender had no desire to be identified. Still, the idea of the whistleblower lingered. Someone had been watching the company closely for a long time, recognizing irregularities before they spiraled out of control. That person had understood the risks and acted when no one else dared. In the weeks that followed, as the leadership team scrambled to contain the damage and reassure investors, James couldn't stop thinking about the individual who had saved his company. He discreetly questioned senior employees, but no one had any answers. Some speculated it might have been a disgruntled staff member, but James didn't believe it. This wasn't an act of revenge. It came from a place of care, a desire to save the company. As time passed, James couldn't deny a growing realization. The person who saved the company wasn't someone from the upper echelons of power. It was someone far removed from it, yet who understood the company better than anyone else. One day, as the company began to stabilize, James received an unexpected meeting request from Emily, the cleaning lady. James Carter sat still in his chair, his gaze fixed on the woman before him. A meeting request from Emily, a cleaning lady he had rarely noticed, left him intrigued. He couldn't recall the last time a lower-level employee had requested a private audience with the CEO. But there was something unusual in Emily's demeanor that morning when she approached him. A quiet confidence, unassuming yet resolute, made him hesitate. Despite his skepticism, James agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly out of uncertainty about what he might face. That evening, as the office quieted, Emily entered the expansive room with an unexpected calm. She wasn't fazed by the grandeur of the space or the imposing figure of the man seated behind the gleaming wooden desk. James observed her closely, noticing how she carried herself. Steady, purposeful, as if she knew exactly what she needed to do. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Mr. Carter," Emily began, her voice composed. In her hands was a small folder. She took a seat and placed it on the desk before him. James leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. "What do you need from me, Emily?" he asked, his tone measured, though doubt lingered in his gaze. He had seen her for years but never imagined she had anything to say about the company's affairs. Emily wasted no time. She opened the folder, revealing neatly organized documents. Financial reports, transaction histories, and detailed notes. James immediately recognized their significance. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. These weren't just important, they were critical. Her notes were even more precise than the findings uncovered by the audit team. "I've been observing for a long time," Emily said softly, her eyes steady on James, carefully gauging his reaction. "At first, I thought it was just minor errors, but then I started to notice patterns." James's hand froze on the page, his mind racing to process what was unfolding. "You knew about this?" he stammered, disbelief evident in his voice. Emily nodded, her voice firm. "I used to be a financial analyst before circumstances led me to this job. Life changed, but my ability to analyze data didn't. I noticed discrepancies in the reports, papers left on desks, details others overlooked. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I started taking notes and collecting as much evidence as I could. When I realized the severity of the situation, I sent you the anonymous letter." James leaned back in his chair, stunned. The anonymous letter, the catalyst for the investigation, had come from Emily, someone he had barely noticed over the years. It felt as though the room tilted, the balance of power subtly shifting. For the first time in his career, James felt vulnerable in front of someone far removed from the world of influence he knew so well. Emily continued, her voice unwavering. "I didn't come here to threaten you or demand anything, Mr. Carter. But I believe we can help each other. You're in a difficult position, and I have information that can help you stabilize the company before things get worse." James sat frozen, trying to process what she had just said. The irony struck him deeply. The person who saved his company from disaster was the one he had overlooked for so long. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone sharp, unable to hide his bewilderment. Emily offered a small, unwavering smile, unfazed by his reaction. "I don't want much. All I'm asking for is an opportunity. I know this company better than anyone thinks, and I've proven that I can contribute in ways no one expected. All I want is a position that reflects my abilities, not just the title I currently hold." James stared at her, his thoughts spinning. The woman standing before him wasn't the person he had assumed her to be. She wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was someone with intelligence, foresight, and the audacity to expose a scandal that could have destroyed everything he had built. "You're asking for a position in the company?" James questioned, his voice tinged with skepticism. Emily nodded, her tone steady. "I've been patient, Mr. Carter. I've never expected more than a paycheck, but I couldn't stand by and watch this company collapse when I knew I could help. I've proven that I understand the numbers, the risks. Give me a chance, and I'll help you rebuild this company." James leaned back in his chair, his hand moving to his temple as he massaged it lightly, trying to focus. He had lost faith in his leadership team, but now, standing before him was an unexpected solution from the least likely source. Emily stood firm, calm yet unyielding. On the desk lay the documents she had brought, irrefutable evidence of the mismanagement and negligence that James had overlooked for years. James studied her, a mix of astonishment and discomfort swirling within him. This woman, a cleaning lady he had barely noticed, was now offering him a lifeline to save the company. "You're right," James finally admitted after a long pause. "You've proven yourself more capable than many of the people I've trusted. Perhaps it's time I start seeing people for who they are, not the positions they hold." He exhaled deeply, the weight of the truth pressing heavily on his shoulders. "Emily, if you're willing to work with me, I'll ensure you get the opportunity you deserve." Emily's smile widened slightly, her eyes alight with determination. Since sending that anonymous letter, she had prepared for this moment. Now the future was in her hands. James stood and extended his hand. Emily grasped it, their handshake symbolizing a shift in power dynamics. The woman who had been overlooked for years was now the one who could save the company, and possibly his reputation. That night, as Emily left the office, she knew everything had changed. From an invisible cleaning lady, she had become central to the company's path to recovery. Despite the challenges ahead, Emily felt a newfound confidence she hadn't experienced in years. Meanwhile, James sat alone in his office, his gaze distant as he stared out the window. His world felt as though it were crumbling around him. William's betrayal, the mistakes he had ignored, and now the unexpected rise of Emily. James had once believed himself invincible, the sole architect of the company's success. But now he realized he had been gravely mistaken. His arrogance and blindness had driven the company to the brink. And the most bitter truth of all? The person who opened his eyes was someone he had never valued. Emily, however, wasn't allowing fear or pressure to sway her. She retained the same calm demeanor she had when first stepping into his office, but her voice now carried a firmness James couldn't ignore. "Mr. Carter," Emily said, her tone composed yet commanding, "I didn't come here to bring you down. I could have exposed everything long ago, but I didn't. I gave you the chance to save this company, and I helped you do it. But if you want real change, you'll need to step back." James frowned, his face darkening. He wasn't accustomed to being ordered around, especially not by someone like Emily. "Do you think you can just walk in here and take control?" he asked, his tone laced with frustration. "Do you have any idea what it takes to run a company like this?" Emily didn't flinch. Her eyes burned with quiet determination. "I know what it takes to face the truth, Mr. Carter. And right now, this company needs a leader willing to do that. You built this empire, but you ignored the people who made it what it is today. That's what brought us to this point." James clenched his jaw, fighting to maintain his composure. "You think you can fix all of this?" Emily's response was calm but firm. "I'm not asking for your position. I don't need to be CEO. But the leadership will listen if I go public with what I know. I saved this company from collapse. Now, I'm asking you to do the right thing. Step aside and let someone else lead. Someone who can restore trust in this company's future." The room fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock. James stared at Emily, his internal battle playing out in his expression. A struggle between pride and reality. James Carter sat motionless, his gaze vacant as his thoughts spiraled. He had always been the decision-maker, the one in control. But now he faced a choice that no longer belonged to him. The idea of stepping away from the company he had built felt like a death sentence. But the truth was undeniable. Emily was right. If he didn't resign, the scandal would destroy everything. The board would remove him, the media would tear him apart, and the company's stock value would plummet. The evidence Emily held was enough to back him into a corner, and she knew it. The room seemed to close in on him, the weight of his mistakes pressing down like a vice. Ironically, the person holding his fate was the one he had ignored for years. Emily, the woman who had cleaned the boardroom and overheard private conversations, was now issuing him an ultimatum. James exhaled heavily, breaking the silence. "If I step down, what happens next?" His voice was low, almost hoarse. Emily's eyes softened slightly, though her resolve remained unshaken. "The company will survive. The board will appoint a new CEO, someone who understands the value of every part of this company, not just the profits. I'll stay to ensure the transition goes smoothly, but they need to see that real change is happening." James stared at her, his mind spinning. He had spent his life building this empire, only to watch it slip away in a matter of days. Yet deep down he knew Emily was right. His time was over. His arrogance had blinded him. And now the company needed new leadership to rebuild its reputation. "Fine," he said quietly, his voice catching in his throat. "I'll step down, but not because you're forcing me. I'm doing this for the company." Emily nodded slightly, understanding his need to preserve some dignity in this moment. "That's all I hoped for." James stood and walked to the window, his eyes fixed on the skyline. The cityscape, once a symbol of his power and control, now felt distant, like a world that no longer belonged to him. For years, he had been the face of the company's success. But in the end, it was the quiet woman he had overlooked who saved it from collapse. Emily turned toward the door, her hand resting on the handle, but she didn't open it right away. James spoke, his voice barely audible. "How did I miss all of this?" Emily paused, not turning back. "Because you never really looked." Her reply was simple, yet it cut deep. She stepped out, leaving James alone in the silent room with his thoughts. The next morning, news of James Carter's resignation spread through the company like wildfire. Some were shocked, others relieved, but everyone understood one thing: a new era was beginning. Emily's role in the transformation remained a secret to most employees, but those who needed to know, the board and senior leadership, were fully aware that she had been the pivotal force in saving the company from disaster. As James quietly exited the building that had once symbolized his empire, Emily stayed behind, ready to guide the company through its next challenging chapter. From an invisible cleaning lady, she had risen to become one of the company's most critical figures, even without the title of CEO. Transitioning into the finance department wasn't easy, but Emily faced every challenge with calm determination. With her deep financial knowledge and sharp observational skills, she quickly became indispensable to the company's rebuilding efforts. The same leaders who once dismissed her now sought her advice, listening intently to her insights on critical financial decisions. This transformation not only gave the company hope, but also ignited a newfound confidence within Emily herself. Emily wasn't just restructuring the company. She was cultivating a culture of transparency and accountability. She organized workshops for employees at all levels, emphasizing the importance of ethical behavior and open communication. These discussions gave employees a platform to voice concerns and share ideas, creating an environment where everyone felt valued. The same executives who had once ignored her now attended her workshops, realizing that their previous indifference had fostered the toxic culture that nearly destroyed the company. Emily deeply understood the feeling of being overlooked due to one's title or background. The employee assistance program she initiated not only helped struggling staff find direction, but also inspired them to dream big. Emily wasn't just building a better company. She was creating a community where everyone had a chance to succeed. Under Emily's guidance, the company gradually regained its footing. Revenue grew, employee morale improved, and customer trust was restored. The board of directors, initially skeptical of her unconventional approach, became staunch supporters. They recognized that Emily saw beyond the numbers. She understood the human element of business and the importance of nurturing relationships both within and outside the company. Emily's reputation began to spread, and she was invited to speak at industry conferences. There, she shared invaluable lessons about perseverance, the power of diversity in the workplace, and the personal experiences that shaped her journey. Her story resonated deeply, inspiring others to believe in their potential regardless of their circumstances. Standing on stage, facing an audience full of eager faces and dreams, Emily reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the long days of cleaning offices, the mocking laughter of leaders who once dismissed her, and the bitter challenges of her past. But instead of dwelling on resentment, Emily chose gratitude. Gratitude for the opportunity to make a difference, for the support of her colleagues, and for the lessons her journey had taught her. Emily's efforts didn't go unnoticed. The company received numerous awards for its remarkable turnaround, and Emily was recognized as an outstanding leader in the industry. The media celebrated her as a quintessential success story, and interview requests poured in. Yet, Emily remained humble. She used her platform to advocate for those whose voices were often ignored in the business world, emphasizing the need for change and the importance of embracing diversity. She became a role model for many, a living testament that true success is not measured by titles or accolades, but by the impact one creates for others. Over time, Emily's leadership transformed the company into a symbol of hope and resilience. No longer just a large corporation, it became a responsible entity that cared for its employees, customers, and society as a whole. Despite the accolades and recognition, Emily never forgot her roots. She continued to spend time connecting with employees, listening to their stories, and encouraging them to share their aspirations. She believed that everyone, from the janitorial staff to the executive leaders, played an essential role in the company's success. To Emily, leadership wasn't about hierarchy but about collaboration and unity. Outside of work, Emily's life flourished as well. She spent more time with her family, cherishing moments with her now-grown children as they pursued their own dreams. They admired her not just for her professional achievements but for her strength and unwavering determination. Together, they often reflected on the journey they had shared, the challenges they had faced, and the successes they had celebrated. Looking back on her life, Emily realized that it was the hardships that had shaped her into who she was today. Those experiences taught her the value of perseverance and compassion. She vowed to continue making a difference, not just within the company but also in the broader community. Emily frequently volunteered with local organizations, using her knowledge to help those in need. She understood the power of giving back and was determined to ensure that others had access to the opportunities she had fought so hard to secure. In the end, Emily's story was not just about personal triumph. It became a legacy of hope and empowerment. She proved that change is possible when someone dares to challenge the status quo and believes in their ability to make a difference. The company continued to thrive under her influence, and Emily remained a steadfast advocate for fairness, justice, and resilience. From a forgotten cleaning lady, she rose to become a respected leader, inspiring thousands to believe in themselves and their ability to rise above adversity. This story is a testament that anyone, no matter their position, can create meaningful change if they have the courage to stand up for what is right. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to fight for what you believed was just? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might inspire someone else. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to like and share it with your friends and family. Let's spread the message of empathy, respect, and belief in the potential of every individual, regardless of where they come from or what position they hold. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring and impactful stories. We look forward to having you with us on this journey of sharing positivity and meaningful values with the world.